They told me I was dreaming too big, that the way I spoke, like wealth was already mine, was naive, that people like me with nothing but borrowed hope and an empty bank account should stay quiet and stay small. But I knew something they didn't. I wasn't speaking from delusion. I was speaking from divine law. The words that rolled off my tongue weren't wishes, they were commands, decrees, vibrations sent straight into the universe with unwavering faith. I wasn't begging for abundance. I was claiming it, boldly out loud, with every fiber of my being. Because long before the money arrived, long before my bank alerts turned from overdrafts into deposits, I had already spoken it. I am a multi-millionaire. I didn't say, I want to be, or I hope I become. I declared it. I carved it into spiritual stone. I walked through life with empty pockets and a wealthy mind, and the universe, law-abiding and exact, had no choice but to match my inner speech. When the world doubted, I repeated, I am a multi-millionaire. When the rent was due and fear crept in, I whispered again over and over, not as a wish but as a law, and the law never returns void. They said words were just words, simple vibrations of sound passing through the air. But I knew better. I knew that every word was a living force, alive with direction, bursting with energy, wrapped in invisible law. When I first said, I am a multi-millionaire, the world didn't change, but something inside me did. My soul felt like it had touched truth, not a fantasy, not a wish, a truth that had existed long before I found the courage to say it out loud. Because words are not echoes of what is, they are the architects of what will be. Every time I repeated that statement, I wasn't hoping for wealth. I was creating it. The power of words is so often underestimated, because we've been trained to use them carelessly. We speak lack without realizing we're planting it. We say things like, I can't afford that, or, people like me never get rich. And then we wonder why nothing changes. But what if the truth was this? Your tongue is your wand, and every phrase is a spell. Most people cast curses on themselves every single day without even knowing. They declare poverty, failure, and struggle as if it's casual conversation. But I learned early on, if I want to live in abundance, I must speak it, relentlessly, unshakably, and without compromise. It didn't matter what my bank account said. It didn't matter that I was surrounded by bills or facing rejection after rejection. I had decided to override what I saw with what I spoke. Because sight is temporary, but the law behind your word is eternal. I started speaking my wealth like it was already done. I walked through stores and said, I can buy anything I want. Even when I had no money in my wallet. I looked at homes and whispered, this is the kind of space I belong in. Even when I was living in a one-bedroom rental, I didn't speak based on my reality. I spoke based on my vision, and that made all the difference. You see, words are like seeds. You don't plant a seed and expect fruit the next morning. You water it, you protect it, you guard it from weeds, and eventually, in the right season, it breaks through the soil. That's exactly how declarations work. When I said, I am a multi-millionaire, I didn't expect an overnight miracle. I expected a process. I expected invisible movement. I expected the soil to shift before anything sprouted. But I trusted the law. I knew if I kept watering my words with belief, something would grow. Something had to grow. Because the soil of the universe cannot reject a spoken truth backed by faith. In the beginning, it felt strange to speak such big things. My past didn't match my words. My family didn't talk like this. My environment certainly didn't support it. But I wasn't asking for permission. I was giving myself authority. Authority to rise above the limitations around me. Authority to create a new atmosphere. Authority to declare something so boldly that the universe would have to respond. And it did, not all at once, but in small ways. First, opportunities began to show up. People with influence came into my path. Resources I didn't even know existed made their way to me. And the more I spoke it, the more real it became. Not just in my mind, but in my life. There were days I didn't feel like a millionaire. Days I felt foolish. Days the fear crept in and whispered, who are you to say such things? But I didn't stop. I kept saying it, louder if I had to, because I knew the enemy of my destiny wasn't lack of money. It was the temptation to stay silent, to shrink, to settle. But I had tasted the power of the spoken word, and I could never go back. I began to understand that everything in my life was simply an echo of my previous words. If I wanted a new echo, I had to change my declaration. People around me started noticing the change. Not just in my confidence, but in the way things were aligning. They'd ask, how did this happen? And I'd smile and say I spoke it into law. Some would laugh, others would nod, not fully understanding. But I knew the truth, that all success begins as a sentence, all wealth begins as a word. And the law responds not to people who are loud, but to people who are certain. I had become certain, not because of external signs, but because of the spiritual contract I had signed with my voice. Every morning I woke up and spoke my wealth before I touched my phone. I am a multi-millionaire. Money flows to me freely. I am aligned with abundance. Not once, not out of habit, but with intention, with fire, with the kind of energy that tells the invisible I mean this. The world might call it delusion, but I call it law. You see, your words are your servants. They go out before you. They shape conversations you haven't had yet. They unlock doors you haven't reached yet. And when your words are consistent, the path before you clears. People think money comes from hustle. And yes, action is part of it. But before action ever touches the earth, speech touches the heavens. I've seen people work endlessly and never break through. Because their speech keeps undoing their effort. They say, nothing ever works for me. And the law says, as you wish. They say, I'll never get ahead. And the law replies, don't. But the moment you reverse the current with a new declaration, everything starts shifting. When you say, I am a multi-millionaire, you give your future instructions. You activate unseen forces. You issue a command, and the universe takes note. I began to watch how even my smallest words affected my atmosphere. If I complained, something would stagnate. If I praised, something would move. I realized quickly my speech was either multiplying my blessings or delaying them. So I got disciplined. I guarded my tongue. I stopped talking about what I didn't want. I stopped repeating stories of failure or fear. I started speaking only what I desired, with clarity, with passion. Because the law responds to clarity. It doesn't operate on vague wishes. It responds to bold, specific declarations spoken in alignment with belief. And the moment I made this a way of life, not just a moment of hype, everything changed. Clients came. Contracts appeared. Unexpected blessings poured in. Not because I earned them in a traditional sense, but because I called them, and they obeyed. The law doesn't respond to desperation, it responds to order. And I had finally given it one. I am a multi-millionaire wasn't a slogan. It was my foundation. It wasn't about vanity or ego. It was about alignment. I was aligning my language with my destiny. And once the alignment was complete, manifestation was inevitable. There is no magic more potent than a spoken truth powered by belief. It doesn't matter if the world laughs. It doesn't matter if the evidence seems scarce. Speak anyway. Speak as if it's already done. Because the universe hears confidence, it hears certainty, and it moves for those who speak in law, not in fear. Every great breakthrough begins in the mouth. Not the boardroom, not the marketplace, the mouth. I built my wealth sentence by sentence, declaration by declaration, and every dollar that flowed to me was tied to something I had spoken long before. When I first declared I am a multi-millionaire, I had no clue how it would unfold, and I didn't need to, because the law is not activated by how, it is activated by what. My job was not to figure out every step. My job was to speak the end result, hold to it, and let the details be orchestrated by a higher intelligence. I had to release the need for control and embrace the truth that speech is the highest form of creation. That everything visible was once invisible, and everything invisible responds to sound. I am a living testimony that when you speak something into law, the world bends to accommodate it. Not because you're lucky, not because you're special, but because you dared to believe. You dared to say it loud enough, long enough, until it became part of the air you breathed. Until every cell in your body started vibrating at the frequency of that truth. I didn't just say, I am a multi-millionaire a few times in hope. I said it thousands of times, through tears, through silence, through triumph and trial. I said it until the atmosphere could no longer ignore me. And one day, I woke up and it was no longer just a statement, it was my reality. The speech had become flesh. The decree had manifested, not by force but by law, a law that had been waiting on me to speak with faith. A law that never fails. A law that belongs to everyone bold enough to use their voice to call forth what already belongs to them in the spiritual realm. That's why I say it still, even now, even richer than I ever dreamed, not because I need to, but because I honor the power that got me here. Because I know that every new level requires a new word, a new declaration, a new law spoken aloud, and I'll never stop speaking, because I'll never stop rising. You cannot speak lack and live in wealth. You cannot talk defeat and expect to walk in victory. Life listens to your language. It hears every whisper of doubt and every shout of belief, and it responds in kind. That's why I had to train my inner speech to match the destiny I was calling forth. It wasn't just about saying the right things out loud, it was about building a temple of truth inside my mind, because long before wealth becomes visible, it becomes audible in your spirit. If you want to step into abundance, you must first sound like abundance. Every time I said, I am a multi-millionaire, I was building a bridge between my current moment and my future reality. I wasn't lying to myself. I was reminding myself of who I truly was underneath the fear, the doubt, the disappointment, and the silence that had kept me playing small. I was correcting years of broken internal dialogue, because for so long I had let scarcity speak for me. I let it write the scripts in my mind and the stories I told others. And as a result, I stayed in places that were too small for me, places where my light had to shrink, places where my spirit starved. But everything changed when I changed my inner speech. People often think money is just about effort. They say, work hard and you'll succeed. But I know too many people who work hard and still struggle. The truth is, effort without alignment creates exhaustion. You can hustle all day long, But if your words contradict your vision, you'll never reach the fullness of what's meant for you. Because the law does not respond to toil, it responds to truth, and the deepest truth about you must be spoken by you. No one can say it for you. No one can declare your wealth into existence on your behalf. You must say it, feel it, believe it, and protect it. Your internal conversation must become your sanctuary, sacred, unshakable. I had to become aware of how I spoke to myself when no one was listening. It's easy to sound strong in front of others. Easy to say affirmations when you're surrounded by light and support. But what do you say in the quiet moments? When the bill collector calls? When another door closes? When you're alone with your reflection and everything feels stuck? That's where wealth is truly made. That's where I learned to speak life over myself like a ritual. That's where I chose to declare I am a multi-millionaire, even when everything around me suggested otherwise. Your words create your reality, yes. But your inner speech is the blueprint. You can't build a castle on a foundation of cracks. I had to go deep and uproot every internal sentence that said, "You're not worthy. You don't deserve more. This is all there is." Those sentences had lived inside me for years, whispered by my upbringing, echoed by my surroundings. But they were lies, and lies have to be replaced, not reasoned with. I didn't argue with the voice of lack, I overrode it. I drowned it in truth. I kept speaking wealth until it silenced every inner protest. I remember days where I felt the battle raging inside. A part of me believed I was meant for more, while another part clung to the familiar sound of fear. Fear has a voice, and if you're not careful, it will speak louder than your vision. It will shout over your affirmations and choke your declarations. That's why you must be relentless. You must say it again and again. You must wear your truth like armor and let no inner whisper of doubt go unchallenged. That's how I rewired my spirit. I made the phrase, "I am a multi-millionaire," the most dominant sound in my soul. There's something sacred about the moment your words begin to take root, when you no longer say it just to convince yourself, but because it feels true, when it flows naturally, without hesitation. That's when you know the shift has happened. I lived for that shift. I worked for it. Not with labor, but with language. Every morning, I woke up and trained my mouth to match my mission. Every night, I silenced the noise of lack and reminded my heart of its destiny. I fed my inner world with the sounds of increase, with the language of wealth, with the truth of who I was becoming, and eventually I became fluent in abundance, not just in words but in presence. My energy changed, my posture changed, my expectations changed, because I wasn't just reciting wealth, I was becoming it. My thoughts aligned, my feelings aligned, my behavior aligned, and that alignment created momentum. That momentum opened doors, that momentum shifted outcomes, and it all began with the decision to make my inner speech reflect my highest self, not my lowest moment. I stopped rehearsing my failures. I stopped telling the story of how hard it had been. I no longer gave breath to the things I didn't want to experience again. Instead, I narrated the future. I spoke from vision, not memory. I talked about where I was going as if I had already arrived. I made my words match the frequency of my calling, not the echoes of my past. And the more I did it, the more natural it became. Eventually, scarcity had no place to speak. It was crowded out by declarations of destiny. People think it's arrogance to say things like, "I am a multi-millionaire." But it's not arrogance, it's accuracy. I'm not making it up. I'm revealing what's already true in the spirit. I'm aligning my internal GPS with the coordinates of abundance. And when your internal speech is aligned, your external world has no choice but to adjust. Because the universe does not create from confusion, it creates from clarity. And clarity begins in how you speak, especially to yourself. I realized that the reason most people stay stuck isn't because they don't have talent or ideas. It's because their inner dialogue is stuck on repeat. They keep saying the same powerless things, and those words become their prison. But I broke free the moment I changed my inner voice. I stopped saying, "I can't." I stopped saying, "This is too hard." I stopped saying, "Nothing ever works out for me," and I replaced it all with one powerful phrase, "I am a multi-millionaire." That phrase became my anthem, my reset button, my reminder, even when I stumbled, even when I got discouraged, even when results took longer than I expected. I returned to that phrase, because my inner speech is not about what's happening now, it's about what's becoming, and becoming takes time, it takes faith, it takes repetition. You don't declare something once and walk away. You say it until every cell in your body agrees. You say it until your actions follow, until your thoughts shift, until your confidence rises, until every part of you becomes a mirror of that statement. And I'll tell you this, when your inner speech matches your destiny, you become magnetic. Opportunities come without you chasing. Favor finds you. People feel something when you walk into a room, because your energy is clean, your message is clear, and clarity is irresistible. You don't have to beg when you're aligned. You don't have to convince when your voice carries truth. That's the power of inner speech. That's the authority you unlock when you refuse to contradict your calling. I didn't get here by luck. I got here by language. By saying things over and over until the old tapes broke. By becoming a new person through new speech. And every time I say, I am a multi-millionaire, I'm not just speaking to the universe, I'm speaking to the old version of me. I'm telling them, we're not going back, we've crossed over, we've upgraded. And I say it again, not out of need, but out of celebration. Because every declaration is both a weapon and a dance. It fights for your future, and it rejoices in advance. I don't wait for evidence anymore, I create it with my voice. With my inner agreement, I know that the law is precise. That it cannot ignore a consistent confession of truth. I know that every time I speak, I send instructions to the unseen, and the unseen starts rearranging itself around the sound of my belief. That's why my inner speech matters. That's why I protect it like gold. Because it is gold. It's the first form of wealth. Before the investments. Before the freedom. It all begins here, with the voice you use when no one is watching. So let the world call it strange. Let them misunderstand. Let them laugh. But I'll keep speaking. I'll keep aligning. I'll keep choosing my words with the care of a builder laying foundation. Because I know my destiny is echoing every sentence I say. And the wealth I walk in today is simply the harvest of words I dared to say yesterday. You can speak wealth every day, but if you don't believe what you're saying, it's nothing more than empty sound. The words might leave your lips, but they won't carry weight, they won't carry force. Because the law doesn't move based on noise, it moves on faith. Unshakable, quiet, powerful faith. Faith that isn't determined by how things look. Faith that doesn't tremble when the bank account says zero. Faith that doesn't shrink when the world mocks your declarations. When I said, I am a multi-millionaire, I wasn't throwing words into the wind. I was writing a spiritual contract. And my belief was the signature that made it binding. People think wealth starts with action, but that's only half the truth. Action without belief becomes a frantic attempt to prove your worth, but real belief becomes a magnet. When I began to speak my future into law, I knew something deeper had to rise within me. I couldn't just say the words, I had to mean them, I had to know them, I had to let them take root so deeply in my heart that no evidence to the contrary could shake me. Because faith is the currency of creation, it's the power behind every manifestation, it's the invisible force that makes the impossible turn possible. I remember the first time I said it out loud, I am a multi-millionaire. My voice cracked, my hands trembled. Not because I was unsure of what I wanted, but because I felt the weight of what I was calling in. I was daring to believe something that no one in my family had ever believed. I was speaking beyond what I could see, beyond what I could touch, beyond what I had experienced. And in that moment, I realized faith isn't about feeling comfortable. It's about stepping out into a space where there's nothing but your word and your trust in the law. Faith makes you look foolish at first. You say, I am wealthy, and the bills pile up. You say money flows to me, and you get another rejection. You say, I am abundant, and you lose your job. But this is the test. This is where most people quit, because they think the results are supposed to come instantly. But the law doesn't respond to temporary belief. It responds to anchored belief, steadfast belief, faith that doesn't flinch when reality looks like failure. I had to learn to keep speaking what I knew was true, even when everything around me screamed the opposite. That's where the transformation began. Not in the external world, but inside my spirit. Every time I said, I am a multi-millionaire, I made a choice to trust the unseen over the seen, a choice to walk by faith not by sight, a choice to put more stock in divine law than in temporary conditions. And each time I made that choice, something shifted. Sometimes it was subtle, a sense of peace, a sudden idea, a stranger offering unexpected help. Other times it was bold, opportunities opening that had once been closed, doors swinging wide that I never thought I'd walk through. But those shifts didn't happen until my faith became non-negotiable. Until I stopped wondering if it would happen and started knowing it already had. That's the difference between wishful thinking and true manifestation. Wishful thinking waits to see evidence. True faith walks like it's already done. I carried myself like someone who had wealth long before I saw the numbers in my account. I spoke with authority, not arrogance, because I understood the law wasn't doing me a favor. It was honoring its own principle, a principle that says, speak it, believe it, and it must come to pass. There were nights I would lie in bed and rehearse the phrase over and over, I am a multi-millionaire, not out of anxiety, but as an act of alignment, as a way to bring my mind, my emotions, my body into agreement with my spirit. Because everything in the physical world is a reflection of the spiritual agreement within you. When all parts of you agree on one truth, that truth becomes visible. That's what faith does. It brings all of you into unity with your desire. It silences doubt. It removes hesitation. It creates harmony between your word and your world. I didn't get there overnight. There were moments I wavered, days I questioned, times I felt like maybe I was deluding myself. But every time that fear rose up, I chose to believe again. I chose to hold on to my declaration like it was oxygen, because in truth it was. My faith-fed words became my breath when life tried to suffocate me. When the weight of delay pressed down, I pressed back with faith. I didn't argue with circumstances, I affirmed truth. And that truth was simple. I am a multi-millionaire. Not someday, not maybe. Now, in the spirit, in the law, and eventually in the natural. The law doesn't honor empty repetition, it honors faith-infused command. When you speak from fear, your words dissolve into the air. But when you speak from faith, your words become law. And law doesn't negotiate. Law doesn't pause. Law doesn't debate. It acts. Faith makes your word law in the spiritual realm, and once that law is established, reality begins to shift to reflect it. That's what happened in my life. Slowly at first. A new client here. An unexpected payment there. A connection that turned into an opportunity. And then the pace quickened. The flow increased. The floodgates opened. All because I refused to let doubt rewrite my decree. People often ask me, how did you know it would work? And I tell them, because I believed it was already done. Faith isn't about seeing first. It's about knowing before there's anything to see. I didn't wait for $1 million to feel wealthy. I felt wealthy, I acted wealthy, I spoke wealthy, and the millions followed. Because wealth isn't first material, it's spiritual. It begins with identity, with belief, with an inner reality that cannot be shaken. And that inner reality becomes magnetized when spoken through the mouth of someone who believes. Even when I had nothing but faith, I knew I had everything I needed. I carried the substance of wealth in my heart long before I held it in my hands. Because that's what faith is, the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. My words were evidence. My declarations were substance. I didn't wait for proof. I was the proof. Every time I opened my mouth and declared, I am a multi-millionaire, I was creating proof out of thin air. Not because I was special, but because I understood the law, and I believed in the law more than I believed in lack. There's a moment when everything in your life starts to respond to your belief. People treat you differently. Opportunities come more easily. Resistance falls away, not because life got easier, but because your faith got louder. Your words gained weight. Your declarations carried a new level of authority. That's what happened to me. I became a walking agreement with abundance. My energy matched my speech. My belief matched my vision. And the law matched all of it with manifestation. But make no mistake, it wasn't the phrase alone that changed my life. It was the faith behind the phrase. It was the fact that I never backed down, even when it hurt. Even when it delayed, even when it mocked me, I kept speaking because I kept believing. And that consistency turned my spoken word into reality. Not by luck, not by chance, but by law, a law that waits for you to believe before it begins to move. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is speak what no one else believes. Speak what defies logic. Speak what terrifies your old self. Because those are the words that carry the most faith. And the law doesn't care about your history. It cares about your honesty. Do you truly believe what you're saying? Is it burning in your bones? Can you hold on to it when nothing makes sense? That's the level of belief that shifts dimensions. That's the kind of faith that activates the law. I look back now and I realize that the hardest moments were not meant to break me. They were meant to test my faith. To ask, do you still believe? And every time I answered yes, something opened. Every time I chose faith over fear, and every time I said, I am a multi-millionaire, the law moved again, quietly, precisely, powerfully. So if you want to walk in wealth, don't just say the words. Believe them. Carry them like a sacred truth. Let them live in your heart before they show up in your life. Because faith is the only thing the law truly listens to, not your pain, not your past, not your effort, just your belief. Speak with belief, and the world will bend. Speak with doubt, and the world will pause. But speak with unshakable, fire-born faith, and the law will deliver what you decree. There comes a moment on every path to abundance where the very thing you declare begins to meet resistance. The moment you say, I am a multi-millionaire, you are not just stating a goal, you are sending a signal into the spiritual realm that causes everything misaligned with your destiny to push back. The pushback is not punishment, it's proof. Proof that your words have struck something real, proof that your declaration has entered a realm where change is now required, and change never comes without tension. This is the part most people don't understand. They speak greatness and expect smooth roads, but the universe doesn't test empty speech, it tests power, it tests authority, and the test comes in the form of opposition. I remember the first time I felt it. After weeks of boldly declaring, everything in my life started shaking. The job I depended on began to unravel. Bills came faster. Friends grew silent. Doubts grew louder. And for a brief moment, I thought I had done something wrong. But that's when the law whispered, you've done something right. Because nothing disturbs the atmosphere more than a person who refuses to stay silent. Your declaration makes the invisible listen, and when it listens, it adjusts. Sometimes the adjustment feels like loss. Sometimes it looks like delay. But it is all divine movement, wrapped in unfamiliar packaging. When you speak abundance, lack begins to panic. The scarcity mindset you've lived with for years tries to grip tighter. People who are still stuck in small thinking feel uncomfortable around you. Your comfort zones start to break apart, but this is not a setback. This is a setup. It is the old being cleared to make room for the new. It is the pruning that comes before the harvest. I had to learn that resistance wasn't a sign to stop. It was a sign to keep going. Because you don't face this kind of spiritual friction when you're silent. You face it when your words carry weight. When your belief starts threatening everything that's kept you limited. And that's exactly what my belief did. It began to challenge every unhealed wound, every old pattern, every lie I had accepted. Saying I am a multi-millionaire wasn't just about calling money, it was about calling truth, and truth has a way of exposing everything that isn't aligned. That exposure felt like loss at first. I lost people, I lost comfort, I lost illusions, but what I gained was so much greater. I gained clarity, I gained strength, I gained alignment, and slowly, I began to see the wisdom in the resistance. Most people think when things get hard, it means something is wrong. But I learned that struggle often shows up when you're closest to breakthrough. That the enemy of your destiny never fights what doesn't threaten him. If your words didn't matter, the attack wouldn't show up. But the moment you say something powerful, something holy, something rich with purpose, the universe begins to rearrange everything to match your voice. And that rearrangement is not always gentle. Sometimes it shakes your very foundation. Sometimes it feels like everything is falling apart, but it's only falling into place. You can't rise to a new level of wealth while clinging to old levels of thinking. And those thoughts, those beliefs, those internal habits, they don't die quietly, they scream on their way out, they resist their own expiration. But the more I declared my truth, the weaker those voices became. The voice of fear, the voice of, who do you think you are? The voice of, be realistic. They were loud at first, they tried to distract me, but I didn't respond to them. I responded to my own spirit. I answered back with another declaration. I am a multi-millionaire. I said it louder, I said it stronger, I said it until the noise had no room left to speak. You must understand that your words are spiritual warfare. They are not decoration. They are strategy. When you say, I am a multi-millionaire, you are not just talking about money. You are disrupting every generational curse, every memory of lack, every hidden belief that says you don't deserve more. And disruption will always bring discomfort. But discomfort is the birthplace of miracles. I had to become comfortable being uncomfortable. I had to stop seeing resistance as rejection and start seeing it as refinement. The law was not denying me, it was developing me, and development takes grit, it takes resolve. Because there were days I wanted to take it all back, to stop declaring, to go back to the safety of silence. But something inside me wouldn't let me. That something was purpose. That something was the quiet knowing that the opposition I faced was only confirmation. Confirmation that I had finally stepped into authority, that I was no longer begging for scraps. I was speaking as an heir. That I was no longer asking the world to approve of me. I was commanding it to align. Every door that closed made space for a better one to open. Every delay taught me patience. Every challenge deepened my faith. Because I didn't speak my wealth into existence just to test the waters. I spoke it to rewrite the atmosphere. And the atmosphere always resists change before it yields. But once it yields, everything accelerates. Once the resistance breaks, the reward rushes in. And I learned that the size of your resistance is often a mirror to the size of your blessing. There's a certain level of wealth that won't be released to you until you can stand in the storm without changing your speech. Until you can look lack in the face and still say, I am wealthy. Until you can be misunderstood, mocked, and doubted, and still speak with power. That is what separates those who only say the words from those who live them. I had to become so rooted in my truth that no amount of external chaos could make me retreat. And I did, because I realized that every moment of pressure was preparing me for the weight of the wealth I had called in. Pressure builds capacity. Resistance builds resilience. And what I was building was not just a bank account. I was building a spiritual infrastructure strong enough to hold abundance. Because money without maturity will break you. Opportunities without identity will confuse you. I wasn't just becoming rich, I was becoming whole, and wholeness requires process. It requires resistance. It requires fire. I didn't fight the fire. I walked through it. And every step through it made me stronger. There were days when everything inside me wanted to stop declaring. When the words tasted like ash in my mouth. When I felt foolish saying, I am a multi-millionaire, while staring at final notice letters. But those were the moments I spoke anyway. Not because I felt it, but because I believed it. Faith is not a feeling, it's a choice. And I chose again and again to believe in the face of resistance. I chose to keep declaring even when my circumstances begged me to quit. That choice changed everything. Because resistance once endured becomes a witness. It testifies that you didn't back down. It announces that you are serious. And once the spiritual realm knows you won't be moved, it releases what you've been speaking. Not because you proved anything to the world, but because you proved something to yourself. You proved that your word is law, that your faith is real, that your spirit is ready. I look back now and realize that without the resistance, I would have never become who I am. I would have never discovered the strength of my own voice. I would have never learned to trust the law in the dark. I would have never developed the kind of faith that creates miracles. Because miracles are not the absence of struggle, they are the reward of perseverance, and I earn mine with every declaration spoken in the midst of doubt. So if you're facing resistance right now, don't run, don't retreat, stand firm, speak louder. Let the storm know that you will not be moved, that you still believe, that you still know who you are, that no matter what comes against you, you will not contradict your calling. Because the moment you refuse to change your speech, the atmosphere has to change instead. The law honors consistency. It honors boldness. It honors truth spoken under pressure. I didn't become a multi-millionaire because everything went smoothly. I became one because I kept declaring when it didn't. I kept declaring when doors closed. I kept declaring when the odds were against me. I kept declaring when no one believed in me. And the law responded not to my perfection, but to my persistence, to my refusal to let opposition define me, to my decision to let resistance refine me. Your greatest breakthrough may be on the other side of the very resistance you're facing now, and it's not trying to stop you, it's trying to stretch you. It's asking, will you still believe? Answer with your words. Answer with your faith. Answer with your silence toward doubt and your sound toward destiny. And don't change your speech, not now, not ever. Because the moment you stop repeating your truth, the law stops moving. And the moment you hold your truth, even through pain, the law delivers. So let the opposition come. Let the doubts rise. Let the delays stack up. Speak anyway, declare anyway, believe anyway. Because that's how mountains move. That's how wealth arrives. That's how spiritual law bows to the voice of the unwavering. I am a multi-millionaire, not because I never faced resistance, but because I faced it and still chose to speak. They say the universe listens, but few understand that it listens in exactness. It doesn't take hints. It doesn't interpret your emotions. It takes your word as law. The words you speak are decrees, and once spoken, they begin forming the very structure of your reality. When you say, I am a multi-millionaire, you are not making a request, you are issuing a command. You are placing an order into the divine warehouse of the unseen. And just like any warehouse, your delivery will arrive according to the clarity and consistency of the instruction. The law is already moving the moment you declare your wealth. But it is your responsibility not to cancel the shipment with words of contradiction, because the law rewards those who never retract their word. It's easy to speak powerfully when things are going well. When your accounts are full, your bills are paid, and opportunities are pouring in, it's simple to say, I'm abundant. But true manifestation comes from those who speak wealth while living in lack. It comes from those who hold firm to the truth when facts scream otherwise. This is the rare strength of those who are wealthy in spirit before ever holding a dollar in hand. They have trained their tongues not to reflect conditions, but to command them. Their words are not reactions, they are declarations. And what is declared with faith becomes reality in due time. Retracting your word is like digging up a seed every time the weather looks stormy. You halt the process every time you doubt the process. So the secret isn't in speaking once, it's in never speaking against what you've already planted. Many people unknowingly sabotage their abundance. They make strong affirmations in the morning. I am a multi-millionaire. I am wealthy. I attract prosperity. But by the afternoon they say things like, I'll never get out of debt, or I can't afford that. They don't realize that the second statement contradicts the first. The universe isn't confused, you are. And confusion in speech leads to delay in manifestation. If you want the law to work for you, your speech must become law. That means you say only what you want and never speak against it, no matter how things look in the natural. The moment you start adjusting your language to match your current situation instead of your future vision, you cancel the contract you made with the invisible. The law works like a precise machine. It doesn't require you to beg. It doesn't require emotion. It simply responds to authority, to certainty, to unshakable faith backed by unchanging speech. The law doesn't favor the loudest voice. It favors the most consistent one. A person who calmly declares their wealth every day, without fail, with no doubt in their tone, will see more manifestation than someone who shouts affirmations one day and collapses into fear the next. Because faith is not frantic, it is firm, it holds its shape, it doesn't bend to pressure. And the person who knows their word is law will never rush, panic, or plead. They simply continue to declare and expect. Let the storms come. Let the delays stretch longer than expected. Let people mock you and tell you it's unrealistic. You must never retract your word. The law heard you the first time. It went to work the moment you said it. And though you may not see it yet, movement is happening in realms beyond your eyes. Behind closed doors, under the ground, in unseen dimensions, your word is forming into matter. But when you speak against it, you interrupt that formation. You confuse the current, you become double-minded, and as it is written, the double-minded receive nothing. Not because the law is cruel, but because the law cannot fulfill two conflicting instructions at once. So it waits until your command is clear again. You are not average. You are not helpless. You are a co-creator with the divine. Every word from your mouth is a tool, a brushstroke, a building block. What you build with your mouth becomes the house you live in. So ask yourself, what kind of house are your words building? Is it a mansion of wealth or a prison of limitation? You cannot speak both and expect clarity. You cannot declare riches and rehearse lack. You must choose the voice of your future and stick with it, through thick and thin. That's when the law respects you. That's when the universe aligns to serve you. There is a deeper knowing that comes when you've decided to never speak against yourself again. It's like the silence before sunrise. Quiet, yet powerful. You feel it in your bones that your wealth is inevitable. You stop looking at your bank account for confirmation. You stop seeking external signs. You begin to walk like it's done, dress like it's done, speak like it's done. Because in the divine realm, it is done. The moment you spoke it, it was complete. Your only task is to maintain alignment with that spoken word, to never undo it with fear-based commentary. The law doesn't respond to effort, it responds to alignment. Think of a captain giving orders to their crew. The ship doesn't turn just because the captain yells or paces. It turns because the order was clear and not reversed. The ship begins its movement immediately, but it takes time to change course. If the captain gives a new order every 5 minutes, the ship will spin in circles. That's how most people live. They speak wealth, then speak lack. They declare healing, then talk sickness. They order success, then confess defeat. And they wonder why their lives don't move forward. The problem isn't the law. The problem is their inconsistency. But the one who speaks and never retracts will see the reward. It may not come tomorrow, it may not come next week. But it will come, because the law cannot deny a word spoken in truth. Your words carry your intention. Your intention activates faith. And faith attracts substance. This is the formula of creation. It is invisible, yet exact. And only those with unrelenting speech will witness its full reward. There is something sacred about holding to your word when everything around you tempts you to let go. It's not weakness that wants comfort. It's power that stays the course. When you said, "I am a multi-millionaire," you entered a spiritual contract. Now your job is to honor it. Not just on sunny days, but in rain and drought, in silence. Because the universe will test the weight of your word. It will ask, do you still believe? And every time you answer with the same unwavering decree, the foundation of your future becomes more solid. You don't have to convince anyone. Your wealth is not a debate, it's a decision. Let them laugh. Let them question. Their doubt has no bearing on your destiny. You weren't speaking to them. You were speaking to the law. And the law is not moved by opinion. It is moved by command. This is your edge. This is your secret. You've learned to speak and never retract. Some people will try to change your mind. They'll say you're unrealistic, that you're setting yourself up for disappointment. But what they don't understand is that you're not wishing, you're knowing. And this knowing is rooted in divine truth. It's anchored in unchanging law. Your words are your sacred instruments, and you've learned to play them with precision. When you say, "I am a multi-millionaire," you're not lying. You're telling the deepest truth. You're speaking from the spirit, where time doesn't exist, where everything already is. You're reaching into the unseen and pulling it into the seen, by your word and your word alone. You will not fail. Not because you hustle harder, not because you beg louder, but because you refuse to contradict your truth. And that is the secret to power. That is the signature of the masters. They speak once and hold. They don't explain. They don't justify. They simply decree and align, again and again, without bending. And eventually, the world rearranges itself to match what they said. So say it again. Say it as if heaven is listening, because it is. Say it like your future depends on it, because it does. Say it until it becomes so natural that anything else feels foreign. Say it when you feel rich. Say it when you feel poor. Say it when the world claps. Say it when it mocks. And no matter what, do not retract your word, because the law rewards those who never retract, and your reward is already written. When you speak wealth with unwavering faith, you don't just make a wish, you write a spiritual law. The moment you declared, "I am a multi-millionaire," heaven took notice. The law began its perfect work. Your only task is to stay in agreement with that truth, no matter what appears. Because when your words align with divine power and your faith never falters, abundance has no choice but to find you. Speak it, hold it, honor it, and watch it manifest beyond anything you imagine.